Hello, everyone, and welcome to the IEP Toolkit. I'm Lisa Kirsch Satawa from Kirsch Daskas Law Group, and today we are going to talk about how to prepare for a virtual IEP meeting. Um, I'm going to incorporate some of the things that we've talked about before in how to prepare in general, because you still have to do all that stuff. It's just going to be a different way that we're going to be delivering the information to the rest of the team. So, first we'll start out with that. How is it legal to even do IEPs virtually? And basically, there is federal law that allows for remote meetings to review and approve students' IEPs. IEPs, as you know, are carefully constructed plans. They're individualized and they are the bedrock of protection for students with disabilities to have equal access to education and to the curriculum. So, with all of that in mind, um, when you are doing online learning, which is what most districts are doing, and you are doing a virtual IEP, you kind of have the double whammy challenge of communication and of understanding. So it's really even more important to be prepared when you're doing a virtual IEP than it is when you're doing one in person because everything is going to have to be sent ahead of time. You may not have as much opportunity as you would have in normal times to reconvene the team. Um, and it there is an overwhelming number of IEPs that are being conducted right now. And so the more you can contribute to the process, the smoother it will be for you and for the other members of the team, and the better it will turn out for your child. So, first of all, there should be an agenda for an IEP meeting that's virtual, just like there is for if you were sitting at the table. And the agenda pretty much follows uh, the with the form that we've talked about before. And and so you want to make sure that you have filled out the form. You've printed a blank form. You fill out the form yourself. And in each, instead of writing, what at the end product IEP would say, in each of those different categories, you want to put in concerns you have, questions you have that applies to what goes in there. Parents, you must remember the biggest issue we have right now is that we don't know the present level of performance of our kids. They have, frankly, um, because it was so like immediate and not thought out and not planned and emergent when the schools were closed back in March, that you know it was kind of like, let's just get some education of some kind to all these kids. And so a lot of kids, especially kids with IEPs, did not get materials that they could access the curriculum. There was no measurement excuse me, of progress going on. So we don't know if those goals that we had in the spring are still appropriate now. We don't know if progress has been made or not in most cases. And so parents, because you had the opportunity to make observations and to probably create curriculums for your children, you have an extra burden in going into this IEP meeting. If the school district or the team try to get you to agree to just adopt last year's IEP, that is a denial of faith and a violation of the law, because every IEP must be based on current functional performance and academic performance. And so to say, like, okay, no progress last year because we didn't have school, we're just going to use that one, does not start with the fundamental, where is this child now? inquiry that every IEP has to start on. That is how you cross the starting line, is by making, you start you start the discussion with what are this child's strengths, what are this child's weaknesses, what do we need to make the weaknesses stronger, what do we need how do we need to restructure education so that we can use the strengths to get around the weaknesses, um, and just understand a comprehensive approach to everything. Also, a lot of students have different goals now than they would have had if they weren't in that sort of limbo learning environment for the last 4 months of school. I say that it's a limbo environment because some kids had nothing. Some kids it was optional. Some kids it was required. Some kids got materials, but they couldn't access them or use them. Um, there was a lot of issues in what happened in March through June last year, and so there may be new goals and new concerns that need to be addressed or added to the IEP. There also may be some that we don't need anymore. Every IEP should have in it, um, it should talk about distance learning, and whether your school has decided that they are going to distance learn in the fall or not. It should be contemplated and it should be included at the IEP meeting, so that the rights that your child is protected by when they're in brick and mortar do apply when they are at home or they are virtual. There is nothing in the CARES Act that suspends the right to education for students with disabilities. There's no free pass for the educators. If gen ed students are getting it, special ed students get it too. And it is unwavering, it is unabridged, it is absolute, and there is no pass. So we have to be really strong going into that meeting. So planning is the first step, and planning prevents problems. So you need to learn, you need to understand, you're going to need to gather, you're going to need to observe, and you're going to have to really, 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 in a different way than in the past, be able to explain how your child's disability is affecting him or her now, because it may be very different than before. There may be, what we're seeing a lot is that there's increased anxiety, and that has changed the flow of many, many things. So you have to be able to ascertain and explain how your child is learning virtually, which methods of teaching are being effective, what's not effective, and you need to really be prepared to not only express what your concerns are, but what your vision is for your child. What would be the best thing you could see happen for your child? It might be a reading goal, it might be a behavioral goal, it might be a functional goal, it might be a math goal, it may be, you know, that he can tie his shoes. It just really depends. So it's also really important when you're creating IEPs that include virtual learning that the team understands what your child's passion is and what your child is interested in. Because if the lessons can be catered or presented to the child in a manner that they are interested in the topic, they are more likely to engage and to sit long enough to complete them. I know it just sounds like common sense, but really, it's true. Um, the the other thing, as I mentioned, you need to be prepared to talk about what your concerns are, strengths and weaknesses of your child at this moment. They haven't been in school, they haven't seen the team, they haven't been observed by team members or by teachers or by special ed directors or parapros or any of the people who monitor progress since they left school in March. So that's going to be on you as the parent. You should have a log, your calendar, and your journal. And of course, you should gather all the past IEPs, correspondence, evaluations, progress notes, and reports. And you should just bring all those with you. Well, you're not going to be able to bring them with you, obviously. So if you have them electronically, you should practice before the virtual IEP meeting sharing your screen. The way that you share your screen on Zoom is very simple. You need to pull up the document first out of Zoom or out of pages or meeting teams or whatever, all those things. And then on the bottom of your Zoom screen, it'll say share screen. You click on share screen, and only you'll be able to see it, but a menu will come up, and you should see the screen where you pulled up the open document. You just click on that screen and it will come up, and then everyone will be able to see what you're putting on the screen. So if you do need to refer to old documents, that is a very helpful way to share them. If you don't have everything scanned in and digitally or electronically available, then again, it's a camera. Pick it up, just go like this, and show them. You can move it closer, you can highlight it, you can just pretend you're in the room and you were showing them in the room. You would do the same thing, even though it's on a camera. So that's basically planning. Gathering, it's thinking, that's the planning. So now how do we prepare? And a lot of people think preparation and planning are the same thing, but I don't think so. I think preparing is not just organizing, it's actually a more hands-on. We're going to evaluate and we're going to review the old IEP and we're going to see what areas we have data on which areas we don't, to tell if a child is making progress or not. What additional goals do we need to add? Excuse me, what concerns do we have? And think about while you're preparing, and again, you can do this on a blank IEP form. Think about a solution or a suggestion or if you might not even know them all, obviously, but you can come up with, like, if only there were a pen that could record the lessons for my child, and then he or she could go back and listen, or or some other memorialization mechanism. And someone on the team is going to be really astute and up to date on resources. They should all be, actually. And they should be able to come up with some ideas or some actual, uh, aids that can fulfill the purpose that you're highlighting for them your child needs. Every child is going to need an assistive technology evaluation. Even if your child has never had one before, doing virtual school is assistive technology. So we're going to need an evaluation to truly understand what accommodations or extra supports or services or modifications need to be made now that we are using assistive technology, even though we've never been evaluated to see if it would be effective. Some kids will never be able to learn virtually. And that is something that this assistive technology evaluation can determine. And then you're going to need to have an idea when you walk in there. If virtual learning isn't going to work for your child, you're going to have a plan of how face-to-face learning can happen. Obviously, it's going to depend on the age of the child. It's going to depend on what services are needed. There's going to be a huge need for services as we go back to school. And so it's helpful to kind of load your arsenal and find a private occupational therapist, find a private physical therapist, find a private speech and language pathologist, a psychologist, any of those types of of services or supports that your child needs, because it may not be possible from a personnel standpoint for your child to get all the time that your child needs. So we will talk about another day if the district will reimburse you and compensatory education and all of that. But it's just something that you should be armed with. And, you know, parents of extraordinary children tend to have extraordinary resources that they don't even know they have. And so this is really the time to brainstorm in your parent support groups or with me, or whoever else really knows your child and how they learn, and come up with a list of these sort of outside resources if you need to tap into them. Another thing that that you need to think about in these times are who has been watching your child learn other than you. And if there are other people, or if there's been any evaluations, or there's been anyone else involved in education during this time prior to the meeting, you want to invite them to the meeting. In order to invite them to the meeting, you have to let the district know that you want those people to be present. Again, it doesn't have to be a professional. It could be the babysitter. It could be grandma. It could be the nanny. It might be a professional. Maybe there's a tutor. Maybe there's an enrichment teacher. Maybe there's an organizational coach. Whatever it is, if it's someone who's familiar with how your child has been learning and how your child has been accepting the lesson, as far as processing, that is a really helpful person to have at the meeting. And they'll identifying those people and letting the team know that you'd like them to be present, so they get a proper invitation notice to be there, is really a great thing to do. So the IEP team organizer or special ed director is probably in most districts who you would notify. If there's others, you want to be there. Also, if you are, they are required to have as part of the team a gen ed teacher and a special ed teacher. So if your child is specifically weak in math, then you can ask that the math teacher be there. Remember, parents, you have the ability to excuse and add whoever you want to be there. So at a minimum, there has to be the team has to be comprised of one gen ed teacher and one special ed teacher. If you want numerous there to make it most effective, then you just need to ask. And then the next thing they're going to ask is it okay if they come one at a time, so that they're not all pulled from the classroom or virtual classroom or whatever it is for, the full amount of time for the meeting. I'm going to deviate for a second about amount of time in the meeting. This is a document that has been circulated all over the internet. If I didn't need to use it as a teaching tool and of what not to do, I would crinkle it up and throw it in the garbage can right now as you're watching me. This says that you can do a sample virtual IEP in 60 minutes, and this is the protocol to do it, how to do it. I'm here to tell you this may be the longest IEP you have ever been involved in, because you don't know the progress. You don't know the present level of achievement. You don't know the present level of performance. And so there's going to be part of this meeting that's going to be about figuring that out. And then there's going to be the meeting about the concerns and the strengths and the weaknesses. And then there's going to be the part of the meeting about what the goals are. And remember, percentage goals are not goals. And now, since you're all watching all the time, I feel like you should be champions of what is a measurable goal. And if you aren't and you're not sure, there's been, I think, probably 8 different lives over the past 3 months that are all about measurable goals. And they're all posted on the Facebook page. So feel free to go back and listen, and you'll hear good goals and bad goals and why we can't measure them and how good goals are worded and measured. And the more you prepare, the more you write appropriate goals, or why the goals that have already been stated aren't appropriate, and you're ready to advocate for them to be modified, is going to help um, move the meeting along, as well as get you the results you want. Think about, what strategies, if they were in place, would help you um, just ease your mind, relax, calm down, all that stuff. Because that's really, really important too. So the last thing that you should do to prepare for the meeting is remember who this meeting is really about. And I think it's really helpful and often overlooked that parents don't talk to their children before the meeting. You need to understand from your child's perspective the accomplishments, the challenges, the frustrations, what's working, what's not working. What does your child think that his or her goals should be? What does your child think are good progress steps to get there? You want to develop an IEP that incorporates, overall, like, this is one piece of the overall plan for years from now that you and your child see for your child in the future. So it's really important that you think about these different components of the IEP, talk to your child about them, and it's super helpful if you send that information to the team in advance, because especially if you're bringing up something new that has never been discussed in context of your child before, this gives the team an opportunity to come to the meeting prepared and to understand why it's a concern of yours, and so that they can discuss it and deal with it at the meeting. So the third step here is to be an advocate, and that is really, I wish I could tell you that it only happens at the meeting, but you all know that it happens every day, all day. And it's critical not to just defer to the team, not to defer to the educators. Broken record moment here. Parents, you are your children's first teacher. You taught them how to walk, you taught them how to talk, you teach them every day how to function in the world. And don't minimize your own role. Do not for 1 second think that you don't know how your child learns. You know better than anyone. You've been doing it for their whole life. So it's very, very important that everyone is familiar. In order to be an advocate, you have to be familiar with the law. And we have talked about the IDEA several times. And I think next week maybe we'll do a little legal review of the IDEA. I haven't really planned out next week yet. I was kind of hoping I'd get some really great questions, and then I could formulate the topics for next week from there. But being familiar with the law is kind of the first step of being a good advocate for your child. The next one is that you have to know the players. You have to know in your district who's who. Who's the director of special ed? Who's the teacher in the ASD classroom? Who is the teacher in the EI classroom? Who is the school psychologist? Who is who are the OTs and PTs? And are they in 20 different buildings, or they, have one per building? You need to be familiar with the structure within your district, and you can find that on most district websites. You can just put in special ed team or special ed services, and it's all going to come up. And you're going to be familiar with every building that has a program in it, and which programs are in each building. And if nothing else, you can read about what each of these programs does. And you're not deciding that your child should be in any particular program. They may or may not need to be in a program. They may or may not need to be in a standalone. But what you're doing is, with everything you read, you should be going ding, 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 ding. because it's igniting creativity and services or accommodations that you can put in place where your child is right now, if that's the right placement for them, even if it's at your kitchen table. So this is just a really creative resource. You're not reinventing the wheel, and you can, certainly think about these things and how they can be implemented in the virtual learning or implemented in brick and mortar if we ever go back there. So a child with a disability is entitled to an appropriate education. It's not the best education. It's not an education that maximizes the child's potential, but it is an appropriate uh, education. There is everything in special ed has an acronym, so it's FAPE, FAPE, free and appropriate public education. We talk about it all the time. As an advocate for your child, you're going to have to determine what's appropriate and what's not. I gave you an example earlier today about what's not appropriate, and that would be to just use last year's IEP, say, oh, we didn't do it yet, so we're just going to use it this year. That is not appropriate. That is a violation of FAPE and of the IDEA, because we must start with the child's performance and progress and where they are right now in order to create the goals, the objectives, how to measure them, who's measuring them, all of those things, to then create a viable and lawful IEP. So keep all that in mind. It's also really important to remember that you really want a win-win. Parents versus the IEP team is not the position you want to be in. Everyone at the table wants the best for your child. It's just that you want the best for your child because it's your child. And they're limited by funding and resources and people and rules and whatever. Do not ever accept the answer from the team that we don't do it that way. That is not allowed. That violates your rights. The answer should be, let's research how we could put that in place, or that may work. Let's check it out. Let's try it. How would we deliver that service? How would we put that resource in place? How can we accommodate that mechanism? Those should be the answers so that you get a win-win IEP. And it's really it's really important for you not to back down. If you believe that your child needs something, you have a reason to believe your child needs that. Perhaps you have an evaluation that says that your child should have that. For example, a lot of evaluations recommend that children with ADHD are permitted to have a grace period to turn in assignments. Schools hate that. Absolutely hate it. They think that it gives them an excuse not to do their work. It's going to all pile on. It's then going to be like, Monday's assignment is going to be late. So then they don't do Tuesday because they're still doing Monday. So then they have to do Monday and Tuesday, and then they get behind on Wednesday. But really that isn't what happens if you formulate the accommodation properly. And I don't want to go into that fully right now, but I hate throwing things out there and then not explaining. So if you do have a grace period accommodation in an IEP, it needs to be very specific about how it's triggered, what the process is for it to be, so that it doesn't receive any disciplinary action. And it puts responsibility on the student to initiate the grace period. It is not automatic. So the student has to realize in advance that they're not going to finish on time, and they have to notify the teacher. They have to notify, it could be their directed study teacher, it could be whatever. And then that is what begins the grace period. And so it's kind of an affirmative action by the student. Of course, if they're younger or, there may be other provisions, but that's like a middle school way and a high school way that works. So, because certainly, getting kids buried is not going to help them. So that we have to have kind of footnotes to anytime a child's given a grace period. So the other thing to remember when you're being an advocate for your child is that one size does not fit all. And every child with disability A does not manifest disability A the same way. The reason we have IEPs and individualized education for students with disabilities is because they are individual, and every IEP should be different, and every individual's education should be different if they have a disability or a special need. So I know today we're only talking about preparing for the meeting, um, and so that is pretty much what I will leave you with. But remember, don't be completely deferential to the team. This is your child. This is your baby, and you really are the best advocate they have. And you can arm yourself to be best advocate in the room. And you care about your child's education more than anyone else does in the room. They care, and they want your child to succeed, but no one can care the way a parent or an advocate or guardian does. It's just the world. So anyway, with that, I will urge you to send me questions. We're doing IEP reviews at a reduced rate right now for anyone who wants the IEP reviewed before the meeting. And that we're doing by appointment. We're going to be doing some webinars coming up. I'm pretty excited about. And so like our page, please. It helps us get the attention of more people. Share our videos. It's all yours. Take it and enjoy this beautiful sunny day. I hope it's not too hot for my West Coast fans. I guess they're not really in the coast; they're kind of in the desert, but they know who they are. I love that I see them every day. So with that, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day, and I will see you on. Oh, have a great weekend. See you on Monday. Bye bye.